This is Listening with Franklin Livingston, and our guest is Christine Stoddard Sánchez.
Christine Stoddard, a journalist, writer, director, actor, artist, painter. What else? Great human being.
No, that's good. I hope so. I try.
Welcome. Tell me about yourself in your words.
Yeah, sure. So I was raised in Virginia to a New Yorker dad and a Salvadoran mom. I'm the oldest of three, and I took a very early interest in art and media and culture. My mom was studying for her citizenship test when I was little. She was a new immigrant, wanted to improve her English and learn everything about this country. And my dad was just a workaholic in broadcast media. But when we would spend time together as a family, we would go to museums. We would go to especially the Smithsonian museums because of where we lived. But we'd also spend a lot of time outside. So I think that often shocks people that I'm a little bit of a nature girl. And I have lived in New York City for almost 9 years now.
Wow. So you are a New Yorker.
Mm-hmm.
So why does it surprise people?
Because I am such an artsy, library, a little nerdy kind of person. But I adore animals. That's one of my weaknesses. I'm not vegan.
Oh, okay.
But I do like spending time with animals, and I like spending time outside when I can.
So it's great. You have the balance in life. Right?
I try.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's hard for a lot of people to be either or, right? So having that balance makes you
Human.
Significant. Human. Ideal human. Don't you think?
Ideal
Human, you know?
That's
somebody we can look up to.
Okay. Well, I don't need to be anyone's hero, but if that's what you're saying, I'll take it.
All right. Yeah, maybe you are a heroic figure to people. No. So, your mom, you mentioned, was studying for her citizenship test.
Yes, and she became a citizen. I can't remember if I was 5 or 6 years old, but around that time.
Why is that important to you? Why is it still in your memory, her citizenship process?
I remember how hard she studied. I remember how frustrated she was. I remember growing up in a predominantly white Anglo-Saxon Protestant environment where she was often confused for my nanny. I remember her missing home a lot, being very homesick, being sad. And you know, even today, she's 64 years old and people still ask where she's from because she's never going to lose her accent, right? And she used to say Central America or a little country south of Mexico because so many people that she would encounter had never heard of El Salvador. And this was in the early 90s, just after the Civil War in her home country had ended. And the U.S. was heavily involved in that war. And there were still Americans in the Washington, D.C. area who had never heard of her country, which is astounding to me. But I definitely had my father, still have him in my life, but he often worked. And my mom was a housewife. So a lot of how she raised me, it has just stuck with me. A lot of what she said would go. That's how things ended up being, because my dad just was often concerned with what was going on at work. He would have her make many of the decisions about child rearing. And she was very strict about education. It's probably why I'm overly educated today. It doesn't make me better than anyone, but it makes me a lot sure of myself than I otherwise would be. And she didn't finish her education. She stopped school at age 12. So it was very important to her, especially as a mother of 3 daughters, that we all went to school, all went to college. She insisted upon that. She said, you all can get married and have children, but you need to finish college and a 4-year degree. She wasn't going to be content with a 2-year degree. So yeah, it still matters to me. I'm not worried that she's going to get deported. That's something that I know many people talk about when they mention having immigrant parents, especially in this political environment, political climate. But I do worry about people being nasty to her because I have seen it. I witnessed it from the time I was a little girl, that people would be disrespectful for no good reason. She could be doing nothing. She could be minding her own business. But yeah, it really, her immigrant background definitely shaped who I am. And there are a lot of things when I think about war crimes, atrocities that the United States has done, and the ways that the U.S. doesn't even serve its own people as well as it could with social programs. Despite all of that, I'm still very grateful that I was born in this country, raised in this country, and that I've had the opportunities I've had as a woman. Because, again, having a mother who comes from a country where even today, I'm not, it's one thing to talk about the 1960s and 70s when she was growing up, but even today, El Salvador has a very high femicide rate. Women who are killed by their romantic partners or boyfriends and husbands. It has a very high teen pregnancy rate, high teen marriage rate. It's common in rural areas for girls to get married when they're 14 or 15 years old, because you become a woman, socially speaking, when you're 15. And it's very common for girls to stop going to school for that reason. They get pulled out of school to get married and have children. So I'm happy that I didn't have to live that life. And I think one of the mistakes some people make when they hear about cultures where women are treated that way is, oh, well, our culture, American culture, is more civilized, it's more advanced. I wouldn't say that. I do think that the gender should be treated equitably, right? That we should have opportunities for men and women and other genders, all the whole spectrum that I'm learning about still. And you in this country often hear about the Middle East spoken about in a disrespectful way for that reason. Oh, well, okay, but did you know that in the United States, Muslim women have a very high rate of PhDs, for instance? And even in many Middle Eastern countries and Latin American countries, there can be high rates of education. You have to look country by country, right? It's not a monolith. I don't think we're better, but I am happy that I was raised here.
Oh, you mentioned you saw your mom's struggles, and those struggles made you someone the way you are today, who you are today, right? What do you mean by that? Do you think you're different than other people? You're more sensitive to certain people, certain instances? How?
Yeah, I mean, I've been told I have a high degree of empathy, and I hope that's true. It's something that I aim for, because I do have two parents who come from very different backgrounds and cultures. I have had to do a lot of negotiation between them, and also in my own life and my own identity, making decisions about, well, am I going to do things culturally that are more this way or culturally more that way? And
explain to me more when you say this way or that way.
Yeah,
when
sure.
living in a given society, like you live in Brooklyn, right?
Yeah, now I live in Brooklyn, but I lived in Virginia.
Okay.
And I lived in Northern Virginia, in Arlington, a suburb of Washington, D.C. Most people know it for the Arlington National Cemetery. They might not know that the Pentagon is actually located there, not in Washington, D.C. But anyway, that's where I'm from. So it's called the People's Republic of Arlington as a joke because it's highly educated and it's progressive politically. But that doesn't mean it's progressive in people's everyday lives. Something that I have observed is that it's very easy for some people. And I, in my experience, white, upper middle class, college education, probably master's degree, people who live in a homogenous environment to say, oh, well, I support people of color. Oh, I support Muslims. I support these different minorities. Yes. And you can say that in theory, but in practice, how often did I hear about people not wanting to have certain minorities at their schools, right? Like they would make decisions about the public schools based upon wanting to preserve their waspy culture, wanting to go about their waspy lives. Yeah, you want to have integration, right? But you don't actually want to integrate. You want to talk about it like it's a textbook. You want to talk about it like it doesn't have a real impact on your life and your children's lives.
So how do you, as Christine, contribute to that or not?
Yeah, I mean, I live in Bed-Stuy. I live in a Black neighborhood, so predominantly Black. Now there's a lot of tension. I see it in the neighborhood Facebook groups. I see it on the street, on the sidewalk. Definitely tension between Black and non-Black residents in the area. Some of the Black residents complaining about gentrification. So I try to be a respectful neighbor. I try to get to know people's names, at least their first names, get a sense of where they live. Okay, that family lives on that floor. That older person lives on that floor. This person's been there 40 years. This person moved here 5 years ago, is a Somalian immigrant, whatever. I try to get to know people a little bit. I try to go to local businesses. We don't have a Starbucks over where I live, but that's one of the jokes on the Facebook group, right? It's like, oh, well, the white people or anyone who's not Black, because you'll hear those distinctions. There's white and then there's non-Black, which is just anybody who isn't Black, right? And then Black, which Blackness in and of itself is complicated too, right? Because in Bed-Stuy, you have some tension between the African-American, the African, and the Caribbean communities. You'll see unity and then not unity. But anyway, for me, I try to support businesses that have been there for a long time, or if they're Black owned, often they'll say, like, these days they'll have something in their window or on their social media, like, this is a Black owned business. I try not to shop at the chain stores. It doesn't mean I haven't ever been to Pizza Hut. You know, they did just open one in the neighborhood. But I try to participate in community events. There's something called Stoops that's been going on for 10 or 11 years now. So it started a little bit before I moved into the neighborhood. And I have participated almost every single year.
It's a yearly thing?
Yeah. It's an annual event, Stoops. And then they have smaller events throughout the year, and then they'll do social media pushes, but it's...
What happens at those events?
So the main event is an art crawl. So homeowners in the neighborhood will volunteer their stoop for one day. And for those who don't know, a stoop is like a porch or the stairway to a brownstone in New York City homes. And they're very common in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. And yeah, so a homeowner will volunteer their stoop for a day, and different kinds of artists will have that stoop to do whatever it is they're going to do to share with the community. So I've done live painting for the community on a stoop before. One year I had film projection, which wasn't very successful because it's mainly a daytime event, and I had to try and get the stoop dark enough, and that was a whole experiment. Yeah, so they'll have these different, musicians and playwrights, all kinds of dance groups. They usually have like 30 or 40 artists participate every year. You get to know the homeowner a little bit because you have to coordinate with them, right? So you find out what their history in the neighborhood is, how long they've lived there, what they like about it, why they've stayed, changes they've noticed over the years. And then more recently, like the past couple of years during the event, they'll close off at least one block, and they'll get local businesses involved, and they'll have their own tables. And it's only local businesses. They don't have any of the chains there, even though there are chains in the neighborhood. And I know the first year they did it, they tried to get black businesses to table. I think it's become a little bit more open, that it's just like independently family owned businesses that table. But yeah, you'll have soap vendors, you'll have clothing stores, bookstores selling their wares. And then they will get the different restaurants in the area involved because they do all the catering. They provide the food for the artists, for the homeowners who are involved, and then some of them will sell food at the block party. And then, throughout the year, they'll have much smaller events, but the main one is the art crawl and the block party.
You mentioned your dad was an Episcopalian. Did you notice any belief system or values that he lived through his life that might be an influence on brothers?
Yeah, so there's the term, the Protestant work ethic, that what you do during your lifetime matters more than anything, that working and contributing to society, being a productive member of society, is of the greatest value. And he definitely believed in that. He still believes in that.
Where does it come from?
I don't remember the origin. I know that we studied it in school.
Oh, really? Okay. I did not study these kind of things in the school.
Yeah.
But I think it comes from the notion you should see Christ in everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever you do, there's a biblical verse too, also. I don't want to quote it wrong, because then people will say, Colossians chapter 3, verses 23 and 24. Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord, not for human masters, since you know that you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. It is the Lord Christ you are serving. So I think the Anglicanism, Church of England, and then we have Episcopalian Church, which you mentioned is sort of like Catholic
the American version of the Anglican Church. Yeah.
So the incarnated Christ, I think the idea was rooted among very hardworking Christians long ago, that you are working to get a reward from heaven, and Christ will reward you instead of your master or boss.
Yeah.
But that changed, because you were earlier, you mentioned about the other denominations or expressions of Christianity and the concept of salvation.
Yes, and I can't remember all the different strains because, again, I wasn't actually raised in any of these religions. I was just exposed to the different forms of Christianity and also Islam and Judaism and a little bit of Buddhism. My parents wanted me to know what was going on, why people were doing the things they were doing. But yeah, you have strains of Christianity that are based on charity, acts of service for those who are considered less fortunate, strains of Christianity that are just about salvation. You accept Jesus Christ as your savior, and that's it. Good enough. You're going to heaven.
I think for
and-
me, especially coming from a country that's influenced by Islam, right? So I see Christianity as Christianity. And I know it's very different. We talked about the Midwest, and a lot of times the older generation, they would say, hey, I'm a Presbyterian, I'm married a Methodist. Or they actually are very much about the denomination because the term religion was used for the denomination. Now, when you go overseas, then you think of religion like Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam, Judaism, Christianity. It's a very different concept. And I learned a lot of us are missing the balance when it comes to the religion or faith. As you said earlier, that some people would say, okay, I accepted Jesus Christ, I'm saved, that's it, I'm ready to heaven, right? I have no other responsibility.
That to
I
me is
got the
ridiculous. I'm sorry.
ticket. But that's a belief system.
Yes.
And a lot of Christians in the US have that belief system. Then there's a belief system that says, okay, it's great to be saved, but you are saved to do God's work,
Right.
which is then social justice, that you care for those who need our love and support and care, right? And then you see these institutions like Catholicism, they started there, but as the history went on, they kept on adding more rituals and explanations, and it ended up becoming something very complex. And deconstructing that is not easy for the Pope or whoever is the head Pope, right? And but so going back to the idea of moral values, like your dad learned something which was good. Your mom learned something which was good. Maybe she didn't like the whole system. Like you mentioned that, this is what I heard, that you were thankful that you were born here, you were raised here, although you have differences. You do not agree with everything the United States is been doing, right?
No.
So, but there's always a balance. We can't have a perfect world.
Right.
And like your life, when we started by saying, I said that you have quite a balanced life, which is inspirational, which is great. I wish I had that kind of life. I either take a few months off, or I can manage social and the other life, whatever other is. These days, this is the other life.
You mean social, like real life social relationships, or you mean social media?
No, well, I try not to spend a lot of time on social media. No, social, like I wouldn't walk into a bar and sit there for a couple of hours just yakking before my podcast next day. I can't do that. And I know a lot of people do that. They would hang out, go out, do everything, and then next day they can act. I can't. I have to be in a particular mindset. Even if I don't go to bed early, I just have to be in that resting mode.
Yeah.
And it's not easy for me.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that my life is balanced in that sense at all. That I have a lot of socialization that happens through my projects and through working with other people.
Socialization.
So, like there's a lot of time that I do spend talking to people and getting to know people, listening to them, trying to exchange ideas, have some fun, share stories. But I don't spend a lot of time just hanging out. Every year, my boyfriend and I host birthday parties for ourselves, right? I do his
Just
birthday
two of
party.
you?
No, but we invite a lot.
I was like,
yeah.
two
No.
of you. Wow.
We do several parties a year. So we do our birthday parties. We do a Christmas Hanukkah party because he's Jewish. And we do usually some kind of spring party, some kind of summer party. It just depends on what's going on, whether it's Memorial Day or July 4th or whatever. But yeah, it's a few parties a year. And we'll have some other get-togethers where maybe it's not 40 people are there, but 10 people, But apart from that, yeah, it's not like, oh, a random Tuesday, I'm going to go to the bar. I don't I don't have time for that. And maybe,
And you can maintain your grades too.
yeah,
We haven't talked about Columbia.
yeah, that's true.
I used to love Ivy Leagues,
Oh no.
you know. Now, not anymore. I'll tell you why.
Okay.
But there was a time I wanted, in my life, I wanted straight A's. I wanted to study at Ivy Leagues. I wanted to do a PhD. Then I dropped everything. But, I mean, you have to do that. If you want to maintain good grades, you can't go Taco Tuesday. You can't drink Tuesday,
Yeah.
Wednesday,
Yeah.
Friday night.
Yeah. Like we've had a couple get-togethers with my classmates, but it's always been tame, you know, like maybe there's a glass of wine or a couple of beers, but it's not like you're going to be hungover the next day because you can't. That's a whole, if you do have a day where you don't have to do anything, then it should be like a relaxing, actually refreshing, restorative day.
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt.
Yeah, sure.
I think you can. You decide not
For
to,
sure, yes.
because you might be thinking I'm accountable to my academics,
Yeah.
my degree, my school,
Yeah.
my belonging. And that's my take when it comes to religion. I know a lot of people don't like that term religion. So I say faith or your belief system, right? Because if you identify with a belief system, if you consider yourself belonging to that particular group, it doesn't matter. It could be like church with the capital C, scattered around the world. Then you make wise choices because of several reasons. And you're one of the examples who's studying at Columbia. Talk to me about Columbia. Channel.
Oh my God.
Which channel are you aiming for?
Which journal? So I started in the documentary program. It's only a 1-year program, by the way. So if you do documentary, investigative, data, they have some concentrations where you do an extra semester. But I realized like I'm fine with the 2 semester. I don't need to do a 3 semester. I already have an MFA. It's enough school. I don't want to go overboard. And I also found that everything they were doing in the documentary program, I was able to get in the other video classes. So I'm doing my 2 semester, and it's just quote unquote master's in journalism. I am doing video and broadcast concentration. So all of my classes relate to video or broadcast in some way. But I don't have a thesis requirement that's a video. I'm doing a written thesis that has some video and some photography in it.
Actually, speaking of this 1-year program, at Northwestern, they had 1-year journalism. And this is very interesting. My first interviewing training or experience started there.
Yeah.
I was working as a federal work studies student. I think we call it.
Yeah, federal work study.
Federal work studies student. I was to interview significant people in the community.
That sounds like a good gig.
Yeah. So here's the thing. It was for the organization I was working for was called Church and the Black Experience.
Okay.
I was the only non-Black. So I was the only who was not African American, and we would go, and my colleagues were African Americans, and we would go to south side of Chicago, which had a lot of problems, maybe still has, and we would go there to interview a lot of significant people who have done a lot of things in the community. So that was the first time a professor from Medill, I think they call it Medill, School of Journalism, right?
That sounds right.
She taught us how to do that, like just like basic things and all, which was great. And I didn't know that I'm gonna do this. This is like fast forward, but I started there, and I was also thinking, oh, maybe I should just join the school. They had a master's program. Now I think you can learn a lot more from YouTube and other ways.
Yeah.
And that diploma, a lot of places don't care about that.